Greetings, my fellow from those sovereign thinkers. This is O3's News Podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the beautiful smoky mangroves, South Florida. And today's date, Wednesday, September 6th, 2017. Yep. And I'm at CT's Travel Lounge, located at 400 Southwest 1st Avenue, Suite 1 to be exact, along the New River, Fort Lauderdale, southwest section of the Andrews Avenue Bridge. Yeah, it was closed yesterday over here, so it was a house somewhere else. And keeping tabs going on Irma, and Tropical Jose is like following the path, pretty identical. And there's another one called Tropical Zika, which is mainly near the coast of Mexico. So I'm just gonna check on the coordinates here from the National Hurricane Center, which just came out. And it says here for Hurricane Irma, as of 11 a.m. Atlantic Standard Time, location 18.2 north, 64 degrees west. That's the location. Moving west-northwest at 16 miles an hour. Minimum pressure is 918 millibars, so it is more compressed. The maximum sustained wind is 185 miles an hour. Staying to this, and the gust goes to 225 miles an hour. And interesting too, they said the eye itself, the hurricane force was like 50 miles apart from the eye. So technically, it is a compact hurricane. Okay, when you look at that. However, the tropical force winds makes it a lot more larger. But regardless, it's wherever it hits, even if it's tropical force winds hit those areas, you still have to pay attention on potential tornado developments. So that's always been the key when it comes to these hurricanes, because every time a hurricane comes through, it'll expect tornadoes. It's just part of Mother Nature. And right now, like I said, is going through the Cantias Islands, the Virgin Islands. Yeah, get closer to the Virgin Islands right now as they speak. And it's supposed to be forecast advisory around 1500 UTC time. So, and the cone warnings and interactive maps and all that good stuff, they're talking about the area is, this whole thing is pretty busy. So like this cone study action may be hitting Florida. And I was listening to this one gentleman, he has a YouTube site called Hurricane Track. It's pretty thorough. He's not really putting like Florida as like a panic mode, but the main objective is to always have everyone just to pay attention. And the cone is like it goes on the east end of Florida or to the Gulf of Mexico. They did have a mandatory evacuation in the Keys, and some of my folks out there are safe right now as we speak. So hey, people down there, just don't ride it out, please. I beseech you, especially for your families and all your people that love you. Okay, and it was so. Like it says here, yeah, it's just a whole lot of stuff, but it's good to check out this area. There's lots of information on here for the National Hurricane Center. And here's one thing about Jose, and it was located at 13.1 north, 44.5 degrees west, which is moving winds northwest at 17 miles an hour. The pressure is 998 millibars. Maximum sustained winds is 70, so it is a big tropical storm and likely to be a hurricane at any time. And there's public advisories as well on here, and probable wind speeds. They'll give you satellites. And another one here came from Katia, which is a little southwest of the Gulf of Mexico, forecast to become a hurricane as well. And the coordinates here is located at 21.7 degrees north and 95.9 degrees west. And it's moving east-southeast at 5 miles an hour. It may just hook up in the near future, and the pressure there is 1,004 millibars, maximum sustained winds at 45 miles an hour. So we have to keep an eye on that as well. And I'm not too surprised because this is an active season. It's just part of Mother Nature's game. Of course, we can still talk about the entire thing about HAARP and modified weather, geoengineering on weather modifications. So I'm not going to go in that route at this time. However, it's just on all you folks within those areas to pay close attention and prep up the best you can. And don't even focus on the high anxiety measures, even with the mainstream news. And like I say, even the Weather Channel has that issue as well. So I check out, the National Hurricane Center itself. And of course, I go to Hurricane Track. The guy's very good. He's not one of those, not trying to be using sensationalism. And one person from BP Earthwatch, he has a YouTube account as well. He's decent also. The whole thing is you got to observe responsibly, pay attention, and hope for the best. So prepare, make it happen, and even after the storm goes through, stick together. Toss your differences to the side. All your political garbage spectrum, toss that to the side. This is more vital than the little petty politics. I just to get that off my chest, because I see some folks that just trying to all want to get excited over little things, and to me that's like totally unacceptable. So that's how I look at it. So let me see here. Yeah, so I'm gonna put that, leave that map on there on the National Hurricane Center, give you all the information and so forth. And that's it on that perspective. So I decided to do a few, maybe 4 things here, and I just find pretty interesting. And of course, about these so-called movements, that come synthetic movements based on past practice and all these other areas. However, I am going to look at here is by Brandon Smith, came out yesterday to be exact, from Bob Livingston's Alerts, which is published by the Personal Liberty Media Group. It says here, globalists will throw Antifa to the wolves to further their agenda. And that's what he has to say. In numerous interviews and articles, including my essay, Globalist Strategy, use crazy leftists and provocateurs to enrage and demonize conservatives. I have warned that they're being exploited by globalists as means to drive conservatives towards greater centralization under Trump and the federal government, and if they continue on the path they have embraced, a totalitarian response may be imminent. I have also made it clear to conservatives that cultural Marxist groups like Antifa, Black Lives Matter, as they exist today, are paper tigers. They are not physically or strategically capable of backing up the viciousness of their ideologies, meaning a totalitarian response is not warranted. A totalitarian response is never warranted and would, in fact, only help the globalists in their long-term efforts to destroy our constitutional principles. To summarize, the goal of the establishment is to use extremist leftist groups like a short stick to prod the real tiger conservative movements. The goal, I believe, is to enrage liberty champions to the point that they are willing to bend the rules and rationalize the abandonment of their morals in order to defeat what they think is great evil. Like all moral relativist shifts in society, there's always a claim that this is a greater good of the greater number. In the end, groups like Antifa will be thrown to the wolves because globalists do not intend for them to win any engagement with conservatives. This was never the plan. So in other words, you're going to do things my way or the highway. We're going to use you bastards as pawns of the game. I've been saying this on my past episodes so you folks can understand exactly where I'm coming from. If you want to measure the speed at which our nation is destabilizing under this agenda, it's helpful to watch how quickly government institutions and politicians abandon or turn on leftists. The faster they do so, is more likely that a major crisis event is in the making. In the past week alone, entire narrative surrounding the mainstream relationship to Antifa has turned sour. For example, according to documents obtained by Politico, the FBI DHS have officially classified Antifa as a terrorist group. DHS has stated that these documents were not meant were not meant to be made public. Excuse me, Department of Homeland Security, our tax dollars put those documents at work. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, you're not transparent friendly. So to hell with you. That's why I call you guys Homeland Insecurity, with all due respect. And I'm not surprised that they're considered a terrorist group, because even some of the other documents that were supposed to be quote unquote not available for the public on domestic terrorism and right-wing extremism, they stated that all skinheads, regardless if they're racially motivated or not, are considered terrorists, and so were extreme right and extreme leftist groups. So it is nothing really new. All right, and I'll just continue on here. The mainstream media, the large backers of cultural Marxist groups, must receive a memo because their narrative has quickly turned negative towards Antifa. The Washington Post classified them for attacking peaceful right-wing demonstrators. Do you ever think you see the words peaceful right-wing protesters in an establishment rag like the Washington Post? At Los Angeles Times also admonished far-left violence, while the Atlantic warned the rise of the violent left. It's interesting because they even John Whitehead talked about that too, and he was for newsbuzz.com, and even the article said the same thing. They're being grilled, okay, on what is happening. So even crazed leftist zealot Nancy Pelosi has publicly turned against Antifa, stating their violent members should be locked up. Okay. And it's rather fascinating, 180-degree turn from a couple of weeks ago when all eyes were on white nationalist groups as a primary threat to America. But does that mean that the establishment did some soul searching and realized who the real purveyors of violence and conflict are? No, it does not. I can tell you this, because a lot of folks didn't really buy the official story. Maybe a handful of folks were anti-Nazi, got caught hook, line, and sinker. However, the writers, the press, said it was a bold-faced lie. They even called out the members of the city council and the mayor of Charlottesville. So that what blew back in their face, and I can thank them for having the guts for making that call. As I have been predicting since before the 2016 election, the less usefulness has a shelf life. If the establishment was interested in following through the concept that Trump must be unseated, then they would retain full public support behind groups like Antifa. The establishment is playing the game of the hidden hand. Right now, it would seem that Antifa groups are to take on the role of the underdog, the battered but still active insurgency against an increasingly fascist regime. A few months need to take place in order for this narrative to hold any weight in the national consciousness. However, for example, while globalists may back away from support of extremist leftists in public, they will most likely continue with private support and funding men like George Soros have always done. Leftists will also have to be inspired to even greater violence than they have already committed. As I discussed in my article, militant leftists are more an annoyance than a real threat to liberty. Published in May, regular Antifa protest organizations are not a true threat. So eventually there will be Antifa groups that are directly trained by government agencies to commit terrorist acts, much like the Weather Underground, the U.S. in the 1970s, or the controlled and well-armed terror groups in Europe during Operation Gladio from the 1950s to 1990s. In the end, all leftists will be associated with the actions of these false flag groups. So what he's saying is nothing more than a synthetic movement. Okay? Synthetic movement, and that's why I've been telling folks in the past, don't get Gladio, okay? Now I'm not the only one who made this statement. In the meantime, the Trump administration is playing its part by preparing the ground for future martial law style crackdown. Trump's latest executive measure, bringing back Department of Defense Program 1033, which funnels considerable amounts of surplus military hardware to police departments across America. Remember, he says, I am pro-law enforcement. We are a law enforcement nation. He's using that same rhetoric that Richard Milhouse Nixon used, okay? So you gotta be really like saying, we will federalize, I'm here to centralize the police, but we'll still be more like a joint venture. What happens next? And well, in my view, the most logistical step for the globalists would be to initiate an attack of some kind on a civilian or government target and ensure that leftists are involved or blamed. So expect them to be scapegoated or witch hunted. With the fanaticism of the left today almost on par with the fanaticism of Islamic fundamentalists, imagine it will not be very hard to find some useful idiot to carry out such an event. Most likely, attack scenarios, in my view, leftist terror groups supported covertly by governments have often gravitated toward bombings as their preferred method. On a larger scale, I would not rule out a failed assassination attempt of Donald Trump. These would be perfect tigers for a wider federal crackdown on leftists, fueling against greater animosity for Trump by progressives and by providing martial law for conservatives. Some people uneducated on the finer point of false flag terrorism, this will sound like conspiracy theory. Some of it's indeed a projection of events on my part, but all of it's based on exposed programs of past high-profile operations by various establishment entities to engineer the civil unrest or to manipulate one part of society to support more centralization and less freedom. Again, as I have said all along, the real targets has always been conservatives. Conservative principles are the primary threat to globalism. In order to eliminate these principles, it is not enough to attempt to eliminate the people that hold them dear. This will only inspire the spread of such ideas. The globalists will achieve the opposite effect they desire. Therefore, they need to manipulate conservatives into voluntarily abandoning those principles of constitutional liberty and limited government. Conservatives must be made into tyrants. Only then conservative principles will truly die out. Leftist groups like Antifa are meant as a catalyst for this transition. They will not only be the only mechanism, but they will be an important mechanism. As we witness the mainstream turning on the extreme left, the temptation will be to assume victory, and that we have known, and that fighting will soon be over. Nothing could be further from reality. Antifa is not going away, it's merely changing into something worse, something more useful to globalists like Soros. If we find ourselves distracted from constitutionalism in our pursuit of the globalists, by this new and more violent incarnation, it will be conservatives, not leftists, that will end up becoming the pinnacle to threat to our own ideas. So those folks that have those constitutional principles, don't fall for the trap. Don't be entrapped by this social engineered propaganda matrix. And even the folks on the left, including groups members of Antifa, and I'm not here to condemn every single one of them and all that. You got folks are pretty intelligent men and women. However, I don't want to see them get trapped either. People have to look at this in a bigger picture. It doesn't matter what your views are. They want us divided so we can be ruled. I don't want this federal crackdown, because it will be martial law across the board. They go, we're fighting terrorists. It could be any single one of us after one particular group may be decimated. All right, it's called a cancerous game. You gotta stop playing the pawn of this tyrannical game. Don't get brainwashed. Don't get gladio. Don't get duped. Because, like I said, they'll toss you like garbage. You're just another number to them, as far as I'm concerned. That's what movements are. Expect it. You have to be vigilant in these areas. Don't be the herd conformist. Be your own sovereign thinking individualist. Which I find vital. It's up to you folks. If you still want to play this little game as being a pawn, you gotta take responsibility for your actions. Don't get swindled by any means necessary. So, okay, next one here. came out yesterday as well from the DailyMail.com. It's a British newspaper, and David Icke did actually put this up here. And it says here, Army fitness instructor and 3 soldiers he trained are arrested for preparing terror attacks as a member of banned neo-Nazi group, which praised murder of Labour MP Joe Cox. It is by Thomas Burrows from Mail Online. 4 British soldiers last night being questioned after being arrested for supporting neo-Nazi terrorism. The servicemen were among 5 people held by police on suspicion of being members of National Action, a far-right group banned by the government. The organization linked to the murder of Labour MP Joe Cox was described by the Home Office as virulently racist, anti-Semitic, and homophobic, and eager to see UK embroiled into a violent race war, probably fight by the New World Order as well. Military personnel were seized after investigators uncovered inflammatory far-right material, including images and slogans, on a crypto social media site, WhatsApp. These soldiers served with the 2nd Battalion of the Royal Anglian Regiment, known as the Poachers, and based in Cyprus, while the 4th was a part of the 4th Regiment Army Corps in Wistenham, Suffolk. 5th man arrested during yesterday's raid is a civilian. And he said here they got the National Action endorsed the murder of MP Labour Joe Cox by Thomas Mayer. Alright, suspected extremists were detained under Terrorism Act of 2000 as part of the pre-planned intelligence-led operation, and there was no threat to public safety, police said. Sources said the men were not plotting an attack. Interesting. They're not plotting an attack, but they're arrested because they considered a legal organization in Britain. A 32-year-old fitness instructor was the most senior of the 4 serving soldiers arrested in the swoop on the group. He was based at the Wales headquarters of the British Army in Beacon, Powys. One of the tasks would be identify the private soldiers that have potential to be future leaders. Experienced soldiers was based at the Infantry Battle School, where soldiers from across the U.S., including SAS, came to train. He is understood to have met the other 3 soldiers during a training course in the town. One was arrested at the Army's Zika base in Cyprus, while a 24-year-old serviceman was also detained. The other 2 held, including a civilian 22-year-old from Birmingham and a 24-year-old from Northampton. None of the men have yet been named. An Army spokesman said, "We can confirm that the number of servicing members of the Army have been arrested under the Terrorism Act for being associated with a prescribed far-right group. These arrests are the consequence of police-led operations supported by the Army. The arrests were carried out with the West Midlands Counterterrorism Unit in conjunction with the Wales Extremism Counterterrorism Unit and the East Midlands Counterterrorism Intelligence Unit. All 4 men arrested in the UK are being held in the police station in West Midlands. The suspect who was picked up in Cyprus was being transferred to the RAF Akrotiri from where he was flown back to Britain. National Action became the first big right-wing group to be banned under terrorism laws in December 2016. British neo-Nazi organization was proscribed under powers outlined their glorification of terrorism, meaning it is a crime, punishable maximum by 10 years in prison to be a member or supporter of the organization. National Action had links to Thomas Mayer, the 54-year-old white supremacist who murdered Mrs. Cox outside her constituency surgery in Birstall, West Yorkshire in June 2016. The loner received a whole life sentence after being convicted of the killing, which was prescribed by prosecutors as a terrorist attack. His only statement given in the court was "Death to traitors, freedom to Britain," the slogan of the National Action's former website. After the killing, the group posted about messages include "Our thoughts go out to Thomas Mayer" and "Don't let this man's sacrifice go in vain." Joe Cox would have filled Yorkshire with more subhumans. Another read, "Only 649 MPs to go." And it's interesting here about who are National Action. This is by Ian Dury, Home Affairs editor for the Daily Mail. National Action was the first far-right group to be banned by the government under a crackdown on extremists. Home Secretary Amber Rudd said the secretive group, which flourished on social media, was racist, anti-Semitic, and homophobic. National Action champion Thomas Mayer, white supremacist who received a whole life sentence for the murder of Labour MP Joe Cox in June 2016. Speaking at this time, Ms. Rudd said, National Action stirs up hatred, glorifies violence, and promotes a vile ideology, and will not stand for it. It has absolutely no place in Britain that works for everyone. An entry for National Action in the official list of proscribed groups says it's a racist neo-Nazi group that was established in 2013. It has branches across the UK which conduct provocative street demonstrations and stunts aimed at intimidating local communities. The document adds that the group is virtually racist, anti-Semitic, homophobic, and promotes the idea that Britain will violently see a violent race war. The organization seeks to divide society by implicitly endorsing violence against ethnic minorities and race traitors. Its website also carries images celebrating the terrorist attacks on a gay nightclub in Orlando, in which 49 revelers were murdered, another depicting a policeman's throat being slit. The Home Office said the image can reasonably be taken as inferring that these acts should be emulated, and therefore the amount to the unlawful glorification of terrorism. National Action's activities and propaganda materials are particularly aimed at recruiting young people. It has also claimed Hitler's major fault was showing mercy. Spokesman Jack Renshaw called for Jews to be eradicated during secret meetings for a far-right nationalist. Police said 22 suspected members or associates of National Action were arrested in 2016. One member, Zach Davies, 26, was jailed for life last year for attempting to behead an Asian dentist in Mold, North Wales in a racially motivated attack. Before National Action was banned, Hitler-loving Access University politics graduate Benjamin Raymond, 28, acted as the group's joint leader and public face, appearing on BBC Radio 2 years ago. He said National Action support Nazism and agreed that Adolf Hitler was absolutely a role model. Once pictured with a rifle, he has said, there are non-whites and Jews in my country, all who need to be exterminated. As a teenager, Mein Kampf changed my life. I'm not ashamed to say I love Hitler. So, and as it says right here below that, Homeland Secretary Amber Rudd banned the group after an assessment that it was concerned in terrorism before Mayer's trial. The group also made headlines for hosting Miss Hitler contests and for posting pictures online on their performing Nazi salutes at the Benjamin Wall camp in Germany, where 50,000 people died in the Second World War. In February, just 3 months after the ban, an extremist campaign group Hope Not Hate reported National Action continuing to operate, but in an all name as posed as a serious threat. Last month, the charity said the group was actively recruiting and training from a converted warehouse, which it had rented in Brereton, Cheshire. Neighbors said a dozen members regularly trained inside using knives and baseball bats. Last night, Matthew Collins of Hope Not Hate said, we have maintained that National Action still poses a very serious risk. Since its ban, we are concerned that some of those tasked with monitoring or disrupting the group does not appreciate how sophisticated and secretive it has become. Contrary to belief, the far right in Britain is an electoral and numerical decline. It has been abandoned the ballot box almost entirely, and thus, while smaller, is also more dangerous and criminal than at any other time we can recall. So it says, joining, supporting, and endorsing National Action can mean 10 years in jail. Under the Terrorism Act 2000, the Home Secretary may prescribe an organization if she believes it is concerned terrorism. For the purpose of the acts, that is, means that commits or participates in acts of terrorism, prepares for terrorism, promotes or encourages terrorism, or is otherwise concerned in terrorism. Proscription makes it a criminal offense to belong or to invite support for a proscribed organization, arrange a meeting in support of a proscribed organization, or enclose or carry articles in public which arouse reasonable suspicion that an individual is a member or supporter of the proscribed organization. Penalties for proscription offenses may be maximum 10 years in prison and or an unlimited fine. So you can say, hey, it's not uniform. They can say, hey, we can just throw anything in there we want. But one thing I know for sure is sometimes I'm just wondering how organic this movement is. Who's actually funding these individuals, these organizations, National Action? That's one thing people really got to need to look for. Because even there's historical information about the Third Reich was funded by the Ford Corporation, Ford Motor Company, IBM, and even Prescott Bush and the Union Bank, according to John Buchanan, he's an investigative reporter. And I read about this, but it has a lot of merit. So who's actually funding these chaps? That's the thing I have to look at. It's just sometimes it's a lot bigger than what it is. But all right, well, I'll be back in a little bit, so stay tuned. All right, so next thing I'm going to be hitting now, my friends, came from the Florida Bulldog yesterday morning, to be exact, September 5th. Says here, Florida Zika Emergency Funds went to a partner of Ann Scott's aerial spray businesses. This is the governor's first lady. I know right now Governor Rick Scott is talking about mandatory evacuation for parts of Broward County, Florida. So looking to do evacuations there as well. So it'll be along the coastline. So that's the thing. Mandatory evacuation for Fort Lauderdale. Alright. So you have to take care of that. Alright, well, it says right here, Florida Zika Emergency Funds went the partner of Ann Scott's aerial spray businesses. It is by Dan Christensen. Governor Rick Scott has used his emergency authority to spend $33.3 million to combat Zika, some of which to pay for aerial spraying done by a company that has partnered with his wife's mosquito spraying business in another state. Sounds nice. Florida Bulldog reported in August 2016 that Scott, via First Lady Ann Scott, had an undisclosed financial interest in mosquito control services of Monterey, Louisiana. The company describes itself on its website as a fully certified team of mosquito control experts licensed through the Gulf Coast, including Louisiana, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida. Further extermination of Louisiana corporate records, however, shows that Scott are also tied to 8 other active mosquito control firms, all at the same Monterey address. Several have lucrative multi-year contracts to provide aerial spray and other services to local parishes and cities. 9 are not on Florida's list of state vendors. Record shows, however, that at least 4 of them, including MSC's conduct aerial spray operation in Louisiana using planes owned by one of Florida's largest Zika finance subcontractors, Dynamic Aviation Group of Bridgewater, Virginia. Dynamic Aviation with the Scott's company to handle their aerial bug spraying because those companies have no plans of their own, according to the Federal Aviation Administration records. Dynamic is partnered in Florida with Illinois-based Clark Environmental Mosquito Management. The principal vendor is more than a dozen Florida counties, cities, and independent mosquito control districts, including Miami-Dade. FAA records list Dynamic or its affiliates as registered owners of dozens of aircraft, including a fleet of turbine-powdered Beechcraft King air spray planes. The Clark and Dynamic Aviation Partnership is the leading provider of mosquito control application service to federal, state, and local governments throughout the United States. Clark boasted in bid documents submitted to Ocala in August 2015. Today, the Florida Department of Health reports that there are no areas of ongoing active transmission of Zika by mosquitoes in Florida. In February 2016, however, public anxiety in the state about Zika was on the rise. And I'm probably going to try to are they spraying that thing called NALD, for goodness sakes, that poisonous garbage? Public health emergency. This month, Governor Scott declared a Zika public health emergency in 23 counties and directed Florida Surgeon General to decide how long emergency declaration should last. It has continued this year in a hodgepodge hodge of counties across the state, including Miami-Dade late last month. Late last month, Surgeon General Dr. Kelsey Phillips redeclared a Zika public health emergency, and Broward and Palm Beach continues, citing travel-related cases. Emergency spending also carried over into 2017 in Miami-Dade and Broward. Governor Scott led last year's high-profile anti-Zika campaign. He also politicized it. From August through early November, during the height of the presidential campaign, Republican Scott's office issued a dozen press releases attacking Washington, specifically the Obama administration, and Florida Democrat Senator Bill Nelson, and who many believe Scott will run against next year, about the lack of immediately Zika funding. On September 22nd, Scott wrote an op-ed article for USA Today, which he denounced Obama, called the entire federal government incompetent, and alleged that federal inaction against Zika was sick proof that Washington isn't just broken, it must be completely overhauled from bottom to top. Scott's article doesn't mention how, under Scott, state money from the mosquito control program was cut 40%, from $2.16 million to $1.29 million in 2011. Politico had reported that in a story published 1 month earlier, likewise, Scott didn't mention that he cut a special $500,000 appropriation for public health mosquito lab in Panama City Beach, effectively shutting it down and causing the state to lose half of its mosquito researchers, according to Politico. In response to an inquiry by Florida Bulldog, Florida Department of Health spokeswoman Maria Gambernini said the state has to date expended $52.8 million in Zika emergency funds, including nearly $9 million this year. Of that, Scott's emergency order caused $33.3 million to be sent to 69 counties and mosquito control districts to increase their capabilities in the prevent response to Zika, she said. The state's records show that Department of Health paid Clark $783,572 directly to supply mosquito traps and monitoring services in 2016 and 2017. How much emergency money went to pay for aerial spraying is not known. Decisions on the mechanism for vector control, whether it be aerial, truck, etc., were made by the mosquito control districts. We do not track the funding specifically each method, Gambernini said. Tracking spending on the county level is problematic. For example, Miami-Dade spokeswoman Gail Love said the country has paid Clark Dynamic $175,000 for aerial spraying since the governor's February 2016 emergency order. Yet in May, the county commission ratified its acceptance to $1.2 million in state emergency funds to pay for last year's aerial spraying services. The balance was diverted into another pot of $22 million in emergency funds that paid for truck spraying, Love said. Aviation Solutions. Privately owned Dynamics provide what it calls a special mission aviation solution to customers that include national defense, military intelligence, federal agencies, state and local governments, nonprofit research organizations, and private companies. Records show Scott's 9 mosquito control companies, all Louisiana limited liability companies with names like Mosquito Control Services, Mosquito Control, Terraborn Mosquito Control, and St. John Mosquito Control, are led by 2 office managers, Gregory Scott and Stephen Palovich. The companies make most of their money exterminating mosquitoes for local governments in Louisiana. Gregory Scott is also managing director of G. Scott Capital Partners, the Connecticut private equity firm in which Ann Scott is a substantial investor owner. Its investment program aims to generate financial returns by making direct control investments in established U.S. headquartered lower middle market companies, according to paperwork filed with the Securities Exchange Commission. Also known as Scott Capital, the firm boasts on its website its ownership of MCS, as well as investments in other companies owned or formerly owned by Governor Scott, including Continental Structural Plastics. Florida Bulldog reported in June that Governor Scott apparently pocketed $200 million earlier this year after an $825 million sale of CSP to a Japanese conglomerate, Tenjin Limited. Gregory Scott said he has no relation to Governor Scott, but CES records show that from 2000 to 2012, he led the private equity group at the Governor's Richard L. Scott Investments. He previously told Florida Bulldog that Ann Scott is a passive investor in Scott Capital. This is good. You can say a lot of foul play here, right? The governor and the Florida state officers are not required by law to disclose assets held in the name of their spouses or other close relatives. Governor Scott, a multi-millionaire, maintains his personal investments in the state qualified blind trust that's substantially independent, but is in fact overseen by another of Governor's former business cronies, Alan Bazar of the New York's Hollowbrook Wealth Management. Bazar also serves as an advisory board member of Scott Capital, according to the SEC records filed last year. The governor's regularly cites the blind trust and declined to answer questions or comment on the unknown business dealings of the Governor Scott and the First Lady. After the Governor Scott took office in 2011, he put all his assets in a blind trust so they would be under the control of an independent financial professional. As such, the governor has no knowledge of anything that is bought, sold, or changed in trust, the office said on Friday. Dynamic Aviation was likewise silent in response to written questions. Dynamic Aviation declined to comment. The question below said the company spokeswoman Avis Foster in an email last week. MCS manager Stephen Pavlovich did not return phone messages seeking comment. Ooh, well. What can we say, right? A lucrative business. The business of spraying mosquitoes from the air that can be lucrative. For example, MCS has a 5-year mosquito abatement contract with Louisiana's Jefferson Parish that's worth $4.3 million a year, or $1.5 million in total. The latest contract runs until January 31st, 2023. A bid document submitted by Scott's company in January shows how it cultivated goodwill with the local politicians. An affidavit by company manager Pavlovich says MCS contributed $25,000 to campaign on 15 Jefferson Parish elected officials in 2015 and 2016. Bid documents also disclose that MCS passes its aerial spraying work in the parish to Dynamic Aviation, the same subcontractor that sprays in Florida. The MCS's homepage features a photo of what is literature called our Fleet and Beechcraft King Air spray planes. In fact, the photo is at least 6 years old, and a record show that the plane, if depicted, were owned or formerly owned by Dynamic Aviation, a member of the Dynamic Aviation Group. Some agencies in Florida decentralized mosquito control scheme, like Broward County, own their own planes or helicopters, and they do their own aerial spraying. The Clerk Dynamic Partnership has mosquito control contracts in Miami-Dade, Orange, Osceola, Seminole, Martin, Henry, Volusia, and Alachua counties, among others. It is in this bid for a multi-year contract with the city of Ocala in 2015, Dynamic identifies 5 planes that it said were registered here in the state of Florida to perform mosquito control services. Online flight records indicate that Scott's terrible mosquito control, in addition to using the same aerial spraying subcontractor, may also use that Florida-registered mosquito control plane. In July, one of those planes, trail number N72J, flew back and forth 4 times between Sarasota and Branton International and Homina Cherbourg Airport in Houma, Louisiana, the records say. Well. Can we see the same old song and dance, my brothers? You know how that goes. Flip-flop Rick Scott knows best. A lot of suspicion. Definitely. Like that whole healthcare scandal, which he made all these pleas of plead the fifth. Probably do it here if it's investigated. But one thing is for sure, he's stripped naked just like his wife. And you know what? It's all gonna backfire. And that's what really baffles me, even with the whole 2014 governor's race. They want us to pick the glamour twins, Rick Scott or Charlie Crist. They think alike and smell the same. Absolutely. I did not like either of their platforms. It was boring, it was dumbed down, and they assumed that we were so damn stupid to take either one of those two plans. Yes, I lived in South Florida for 40 years, I can say that. I'm not saying everything when Rich got signed was bad, right? The man has his pros and cons, but he does a little dirty deal on the side, which allegedly makes it very suspicious, a suspect. Right now he has his hands full right now with the whole thing with Hurricane Irma, but we still got to pay attention to all the other dirty dealings in Tallahassee. That's why Bob White, right now, my view at this time, based on his platform, I support. Not because he's a Republican Liberty Caucus guy, but constitutional principles that he's been noticing too, special interests and lobby groups have been being benefited, not the people of Florida. And he's right. State of Florida should not be a corporation, period. So, and even the whole Florida Zika thing, they use null. Okay, you can look that up. I did a show on that, by the way, a couple of years ago, I would say. And plus the whole Zika thing was like synthetic. It was pouring some chemicals in the waters of Brazil. It had nothing to do with some Zika virus from mosquitoes. Based on that one, I got like 700 hits on that one, so that's pretty cool. All right, I'm gonna do one more here before I go, and this one here is by James G. Harnsberger from the Future of Freedom Foundation. Editorial: Interventionism and the Korean Crisis came out yesterday. As it reads, if war ends up breaking out in Korea, President Trump and the Pentagon, the CIA will be announcing that it was all North Korea's fault. They'll say that North Korea was begging for war and that the United States was forced to act to protect national security. Of course, in the process, they will be ignoring the intervention sanctions that the United States and the United Nations have imposed on North Korea for decades, an indirect act of war that has targeted and killed countless North Korean citizens. In the event of war, Trump and his national security establishment will be speaking falsely and disingenuously. In fact, the root of another war in Korea will be interventionism, the philosophy of foreign policy that has held the United States in its grip for more than a century. Notice something important about North Korea's behavior. None of it's aimed at Switzerland, notwithstanding the fact that Korea is about 1,000 miles closer to Switzerland than the United States. Why not? Why North Korea's attention devoted toward the United States and not toward Switzerland? The answer lies in interventionism, the immoral and destructive foreign policy philosophy that undergirds the United States but not Switzerland. Notice that Switzerland has no troops in Korea. The United States does. Tens of thousands of troops. Notice that Switzerland does not conduct joint military exercises with the South Korean military. The United States does on a regular basis. Notice that Switzerland does not commit to regime change in North Korea. The United States is. The Swiss government minds its own business. It's committed to the principle of self-defense. If another nation state were able to attack Switzerland, the Swiss would be more than prepared to defend themselves. That's why no one, including the Nazi regime in World War II, dared to attack and invade Switzerland. The Swiss would chew them up and spit them out. The U.S. government, on the other hand, is the world premier intervener, interloper, and meddler. That is why it's in Korea, to intervene, interlope, and meddle in a civil war that has never been any of its business. Don't forget something else. U.S. troops in Korea are there as leftovers from the illegal U.S. intervention into the Korean Civil War more than 60 years ago. It was illegal, given that the Pentagon and CIA, whose officials pledged to support and defend the Constitution, waged that war without the constitutionality required congressional declaration of war. If the United States were not intervening, interloping, or meddling in North Korea, the United States would stand in the same position that Switzerland stands. The North Korean regime would have as much interest in targeting the United States with nuclear weapons as it has in targeting Switzerland, i.e., no interest whatsoever. There is one and the only reason why North Korea is striving for nuclear missiles that can hit the United States. to deter a U.S. regime change operation, like the one that the Pentagon and the CIA have initiated ever since the inception after World War II. The North Koreans are not stupid. They know that a nuclear capability is the one thing that might deter a U.S. regime change operation against North Korea. Thus, there is one surefire way to bring an end in the crisis in Korea: end U.S. interventionism. Bring all U.S. troops home immediately and discharge them. They are not necessary, not for a nation that embraces non-interventionism. Of course, Trump, the Pentagon, the CIA are not about to do that. Pride and national honor are at stake, what they would say. And so the crisis continues as it always does when it comes to foreign interventionism. Whenever one finds the U.S. government intervening, interloping in the Middle East, is a virtual certainty one will find a crisis. In a perversely dysfunctional way, the North Korean and U.S. governments thrive off each other. The North Korean regime cites the threat of an ever-present U.S. regime change operation to centralize its power and its control over the North Korean people. The U.S. regime cites the threat of a possible nuclear attack by North Korea on the United States to centralize its power and its control over the American people. War in Korea is a distinct possibility because Trump, the Pentagon, and the CIA could rationalize the importance of striking North Korea before it is able to hit the United States with a nuclear missile. They would consider hundreds of thousands of lives lost in Korea on both sides to have been worth that those lives would be considered secondary importance to the lives of the American people. That's why the South Koreans are missing the big point here. It is they, not the American people, who will pay the price for another U.S. interventionist war in Korea. The smartest thing the South Koreans could do is to give the United States the boot, throw all U.S. troops out of their country. That would save their country from the consequences of U.S. intervention. Given that reason, there will be a short supply if war breaks out. What everyone should realize now is that no deaths are necessary in Korea. No war is necessary. All that needs to be done is for the America to abandon its morally bankrupt and destruction foreign policy of interventionism and bring all U.S. troops home now. Forget pride and national honor. Just bring them home. But if a war does break out, perhaps deadly and disastrous consequences will finally cause a critical mass of the American people to force a change in policy, one that mirrors of Switzerland and, for that matter, the non-interventionist foreign policy of which our country was founded. You can't argue with that. You have to read the entire history, how all this came to play. This is why, my friends, foreign entanglements are dangerous. Imperialism, or being an empire, is unhealthy. The people in Korea have to take a stand. Even China is leery now because the whole problem is North Koreans feel like they're being a bellboy to these two nations, the United States and China, and of course the United Nations. So to these particular entities. They say, hey, don't mess with us. Am I crazy about Kim Jong-un? Absolutely not. But you have to always look at the bigger picture. I recommend people start this Korean conflict on a geopolitical perspective. Go back to around 1945, 1946, when how the CIA tried to intervene with Korea. It's not a pretty sight. Blowback by Charles Johansson talked about it. It's time for the United States to be a constitutional republic, not an empire. Bring our troops home. All the bases around the world. If some of those countries don't like it, too bad. Because I'm tired of it. My fellow brothers and sisters are serving, are being fatigued. And that's not good for them or for their families. And that is it. I thank everyone for listening. Plus, feel free to download and share throughout your social media networks. If you have any questions, comments, or send me something that's interesting you may want to check out, whatever you do, please Address to your correspondence with decorum. You keep me on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Tumblr, YouTube, Freedoms Network, Scene.life, Minds.com, FutureNet.club, or Patreon.com/LuckyLuck3, 3 eyes. If you want to be a donor, supporter, and all that, that'd be great. In addition, you can email me at LuckyLuck3@gmail.com or LuckyLuck03@protonmail.com for you encrypted types. Alright, my friends, once again, thank you for your time. But always remember that the maniac resistance is helping for the soul and can liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Keep on spreading the love. May your guardian spirits be with you.